So we still may be waiting for a few participants, but I suggest we begin without further delay. On behalf of Premier Continuum, thank you so much for joining us today for another webinar in our Insight series. So we also thank the BCI for hosting this webinar. So as you will discover, our Insight sessions are all about sharing knowledge, exchanging ideas, and exploring practical solutions tailored for resilient professionals like you. So Marie-Hélène, if you can go to the other uh, slide, please. So my name is Marie-Hélène Boudreau-Picard, and I'm a senior advisor in business continuity and resilience at Premier Continuum. And today, I have the pleasure of being your facilitator for this webinar, where heart meets science in solution design. Marie-Hélène, the other piece. I hope our session will inspire you and equip you for the challenges ahead. To ensure everything runs smoothly today, I'd like to highlight a few basic guidelines. So throughout the session, we encourage you to participate, ask questions, and share your thoughts in the chat. You can also use the chat for any issues. And have fun, engage, and remember that you will have access to the session recording and our presentation afterward. So next slide, please. A little bit about Premier Continuum's mission. So we're here to help organizations prepare for the unexpected by increasing their resilience. For over 25 years, we've been helping organizations across Canada, US, and worldwide with our three key solutions: our certified training from the Business Continuity Institute and ICOR, our expert consulting services, and our resilience management software, ParaSolution. We'd also like to highlight two exciting news that we're very proud of at Premier Continuum. So at the recent PCI Global Awards, we received not one, but two prestigious global recognition: the Award for Diversity and Inclusion Champion and the Consultant of the Year Award, won by Philippe Tassé-Gagné, our Vice President of Consulting Services and Talent Development. So we couldn't be prouder. Next slide, please. It is now my privilege to introduce our speaker today, Marie-Hélène Primo, our Executive Vice President at Premier Continuum. So with over 20 years in the business, Marie-Hélène stands out as a true leader, practitioner, and trailblazer in continuity and resilience. Her expertise is widely recognized as she frequently speaks at various local and international important conferences and committees. Since 2008, Marie-Hélène has also been sharing her knowledge as an instructor with the BCI and is the former chair of the BCI Canada chapter. In 2023, she earned the prestigious title of Consultant of the Year at the BCI Americas Award, which highlights her exceptional impact in our industry. So now, the moment you've all been waiting for, I give the floor to Marie-Hélène.
Well, thank you very much, Marie-Hélène, for this introduction. Very humbling and very happy to be, not very humble, but I'm humbled by all this recognition. Thank you very much for being present today. I hope you'll enjoy the session. So today, as Marie-Hélène was explaining, we'll be focusing on the professional practice number 4, which is solutions design within the good practice guideline. So elements we'll be covering is key concepts regarding resilient solutions design, as well as exploring effective solutions and strategies, as well as getting practical insights. So I hope you'll find it beneficial. So first and foremost, being a BCI instructor, I always like to, bring it back to the business continuity management system. So where solution design actually fits within the actual process is within here, the solutions design. So solutions design is after having performed the business impact analysis and understanding the risks that the organization covers, and that we look at what we can do in order to be able to continue operations, and then we'll work on enabling solutions. So first of all, so when I'm talking about analysis, so this is really, a foundation of your business continuity program. If some of you may want to focus and jump, right to the solutions design, well, it's better, you're better off, doing your homework and trying to understand better what the business does. So that's what the business impact analysis provides, gives you a metric of the speed at which you will need to be recovering. So we all know that everything that the organization does is important, otherwise it would not be doing it. But if we're looking at doing the different, if we want to be able to, achieve, well, we do need to focus. We need to look at what is, urgent to perform. Do we need to do this in the first few minutes after an incident occurs, or do we have some leeway and we can wait 24 hours? Can we wait a week to do some of the tasks and the different operations that the organization does? So really, this is, will be a wealth of information. It will be very useful so that we can actually move on to solutions design after. Another element regarding the actual prioritization is also understanding, well, what can I work with when I'm actually, what do I need to operate? So yes, I need to be back within 4 hours, but maybe I can do something very simple. Maybe it's just being able to answer calls, or maybe it's to have my full system back. And for that, well, do I need to have my entire system as it is? Or let's say, for example, if I'm a store, well, I don't necessarily need to know what are my sales from yesterday. I just need to be able to do and process the sales that are needing to be performed today. So maybe I don't need to have really the data that was there before. I just need to be able to operate and offer the service as of now. Obviously, if I need to know what the orders were from yesterday, well, then I do need to have this information back. So these are all, key information that I'll be getting from the prioritization activities. So words such as the maximum tolerable period of disruption, which is really the furthest you can wait before it actually has some significant impact, that it becomes unacceptable to the business. Your recovery time objective is, what you'd be comfortable with, and, aligning with actually the money it's going to take to actually make those solution take place. So really getting that wall is also something that will really be helpful in moving forward to the next phase. Another area also, that's another component that's going to be important to know, is also the MBCO, so minimum business continuity objective. What some others may call it the minimum service level. So what am I intending to offer? I just spoke about maybe just answering the call and telling that I'm going to be, delaying the service, and then people can understand, and then prioritizing the most urgent requests. Or it could be the full, 100%. So it's understanding that as well. We've also put here the recovery point objective, because that's tied to technology. So how far back in time can I actually, if I give you yesterday's data, is that sufficient for you, or you really need to have the last minute? That will also, come into play. What's the nature of the business that you're doing? If you're a financial institution, obviously you want to know what did people have in their bank account the minute before, or even the second before the system went down, because you don't want people to be withdrawing money that they don't have anymore. That could be a financial loss. So other factors that will come into play is regulatory requirements, contractual requirements, the financial impacts. So those are really, important. Then the most robust business impact analysis you'll perform will actually help you in justifying what will come next. In terms of the, and then within that next, there will be the IT disaster recovery plans, which we will actually cover when we talk about solutions design. Just a few words, since we're a year into the edition 7.0 of the Good Practice Guidelines. Just wanted to point out some of the key differences between the new version and version 2018. Key elements is, a good distinction between the groups of strategies developers. I mean, if you've been involved in solutions design, this makes total sense. If you haven't been involved, you may not necessarily think about that. So it's, making the difference between activities owners, so the people that actually do the process, they are the experts in their process, and then the resource owners, those are the ones that supply you the services so that you're able to continue, that provide you the tools. So if, as an example, within a, let's say I'm customer service. So customer service would be that activity owner, and people from IT, from HR, people from communications. So those would be the resource owners, people from security. So especially if you're within like manufacturing, distribution, you want to ensure that security would be involved in your processes in terms of development. We'll talk about the process of selecting the actual strategies, but it's important that you engage with both parties because of the nature of what needs to be accomplished in solutions design. In previous versions of the good practice guidelines, there used to be 5 design solutions where we're talking about replicating the actual like replication, and all of these diversification. So this was removed because it was hard sometimes to allocate the various uh, strategies that you may have or solutions that you may have within the different types of resource that you need to recover. But the spirit remains, it's just that it's not as a central focus. And really the entire angle of the content has changed. And it's really interesting. There's lots of comparison, lots of detail regarding prerequisites, and that's a key element. So I do encourage you, if you haven't yet looked at the newer version of the good practice guidelines, professional practice number 4 is really more detailed than it used to. Something that hasn't changed is the fact of focusing on resources. We do like when at Premier Continuum we engage with our clients that rather than being scenario focused is to really look at consequences. So regardless of what could cause the loss of access to premise or loss of premise, well, we want to look at what are those different what could go wrong and how can we provide it? Obviously, the nature of the risk or what could happen will inform in prioritizing one or other solutions, but really focusing on this. For example, when our clients opened up their plans when COVID hit, well, rather than using the loss of employees for the most part, they've actually used the loss of access to premise because that was the main consequences that they were living from COVID. It also helps you if you you are facing incidents that have multiple consequences that you can pull from various areas rather than having to look at very lengthy plans. Again, makes it more agile, makes it easier also for the business, for the activity owners to really engage and develop and reduce the work that they need to do in terms of preparation. That doesn't, preempt the fact that, like, if we look at loss of IT and communication, well, if you do have a cyber attack, the extent of planning may differ a bit, but lots of the solutions that you will have developed for the loss of IT or communication will be helpful, especially from a activity owner's perspective. So like the customer service team, we're expecting the cyber incident response team to have a developed plan. Another distinction that is within the good practice guidelines is also the notion that we may have an overall strategy that we may want to have, but there's various solutions. For example, I have a client that was looking at, well, they need to continue distribution. Well, there's various solutions that they can implement. So one would be that, well, they know that they want to continue their operations within a delay of 3 days. So they could look at diversification, for example, so having multiple sites where they maintain inventory, or they could decide that they are having a quick ship solution. And, even depending on the duration of the solution, or the situation, they could decide to engage and have different solutions as well. You can see here as an example, you could have a sequence of within the first few hours what you intend to do, and then move on to, let's say, a level of service that is according to your desire or expectations. Another element as we're going through going through the solutions design is also to do a gap analysis. So when you were doing your business impact analysis and risk assessment, you may have already asked what were the current measures that were in place in order to continue operations. I know that I have a lot of clients that when we report up to the management committee, well, they need to know and they want to know, well, what do we already have? So they want to have kind of the picture of what the situation is. So in that requirements gap analysis, we'll look at, well, what's currently there and is this meeting the current requirement? There could even be some situations where you realize that you've actually are over investing because maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there was a move to cloud, and we decided to move everything and put them fully available, redundant. But really, we're realizing as we did the business impact analysis that there are some activities that either can be set aside and some systems that therefore can actually be maybe recovered later or have a different strategy. So that could actually give you an opportunity for freeing up some money for other strategies. But most importantly, most of the time, what we discover is that there is an expectation that systems will be back within a shorter time frame than the actual capability. And it's important that people, understand that it's not because you've asked for a system to be available within a very short time frame that it's actually going to be available. So that the rubber meets the road, that people understand that even if you've written it in your BIA, it doesn't mean that it's actually been done. And for that reason, we do like to look at, what's you may call this the recovery time that's achievable. So you may have seen you may have seen RTA, you may have seen official RTO. So there's different ways in which this is being called within organization. But you really want to know, what's the capability so that you can have an informed conversation, an intelligent conversation with the business, as well as uh, bringing up and reporting up to top management so that they can set their risk appetite and determine if they do want to put more money into it. This going back a bit to the point I was making earlier regarding, well, first, if you look here on the right-hand side, so this is an example of the good practice guidelines where we have that column for prerequisites. So I think that's important, especially if you're not that aware. And even myself, I was lately helping out a client to assess different solutions. So I actually went back to the good practice guidelines and looked at different solutions that would be available. So don't hesitate. It's not because you've been in the business for many years that it's not valuable to go back to the book. Something that the good practice guidelines and the 7.0 version highlights is the fact that you could have solutions that are valid for certain period of time. So we could say that within, elements that need to be recovered within a category A, or a tiering one, that those that need to be recovered within 1 hour, well, the type of category, the type of strategies that could be used is a replication strategy. If we're expecting it to be more, within hours, then we could look at restore. If we're more into the category C, then would be recreating. So just giving an idea of based on the results of the business impact analysis, well, this will also influence the strategies that we will put in place. And some could actually even be evolution through time. In terms of key business strategies, so I did mention what the different strategies were for the actual elements of the different process, the different types of consequences. So if we think, for example, in terms of people, well, there's obviously, if you can do succession planning within the organization to ensure that there's more than one person that knows how to do the work, that would be ideal. Ensuring, I was having a conversation with a client regarding travel risks. while making sure that people that have key knowledge, that have the similar experience, that they don't travel within the same on the same means of transportation, be it a plane. If you remember a few years back, there was members of the Parliament of Poland that actually were all on the same plane and it crashed. You don't want to be in that posture. So that from an employee standpoint, but these are things that you need more to manage in a risk management process. So at time of incident, if you haven't done the work, then you won't be able to do anything with it. Because people won't be able to perform the job. So if it was just a good idea that was raised, well, we should do cross training, but if we haven't done it, then we cannot invoke it at time of incident. But maybe if we've at least documented procedures so that someone could pick it up and we could hire a temp, someone who's that expertise, a consultant that could come in, that could be a measure that we could put in place for that purpose. When we're talking about loss of premises, well, we would have elements such as, well, obviously recovery sites. So if that's still valid with your business model, lots of people have moved to working from home. So ensuring that you have space at your offices to bring people back into the office if ever they didn't have any electricity at home, for example. We could have from a process from a location standpoint, we could also have operations running in multiple locations. So that also provides us some diversification and making us less subject to the actual loss of a specific building. In those cases, ensure that you have the appropriate expertise at the other location, and also be cognizant of the fact that the actual volume of work will not be able to be processed unless we're putting aside some other tasks. We even had some strategies of moving people that were less critical so that we can free up some space. So there's really various strategies. If we think of the IT, we'll actually have a slide on that going a little further. Same for the loss of the business partners. So when we talk about technology, well, there's different folds to technology. So one is, I mentioned cyber right before, when we're looking at the scenarios. Well, cyber is definitely the cyber attacks are definitely a vector for interruption. So therefore, there is actual work that needs to happen to prepare the organization to be able to survive a cyber attack. Some from a actual investigation, being able to eradicate. So there's a lot of investment that needs to happen so that you can detect and then eradicate. But there's also aside from the business that they also need to understand that their business could come to a halt and the actual disaster recovery plans that were put in place to either duplicate or to be in high availability might not be operational, because you don't want to go back to your other that your backup solution, it might have been contaminated. So cyber, there's those different folds. Also from that, so again, we could talk a lot about that. If we think of artificial intelligence, well, again, something that can assist you in helping you in building your strategies. It could even give you some ideas. If you haven't, tried, you could go into ChatGPT and ask questions about what could be potential solutions. Obviously, you'll need to have experience to determine if it makes sense what you're being given as suggestions. It can also help you in forming the, what seems to be the trend in terms of the different risks that are occurring. So it could also inform on that piece. But also one area what I wanted to emphasize regarding artificial intelligence, we were having a webinar or a coffee chat last week with other resilience professional. And so some were mentioning that they're using artificial intelligence to replace, some processes that were done initially manually. So you need to think that maybe those tools, that as they are becoming more and more ingrained within the business model, well, you also need to ensure that they are being continued, considered if ever there was an interruption, and therefore that you don't only focus on human-enabled functions and processes, but also on digital systems. Another component is all the cloud, and that magic thinking that cloud will solve all issues. Obviously, when you're using the cloud, you're less dependent on your own premise. But it's not because you're going into the cloud that it comes with a DR solution. I think that now people understand it better, that it's not AWS or it's not Azure that's going to recover your system, but it's easier to maybe set up some replication. So ensure, you look at the fine prints and you understand well what the agreement you have with your provider, either if you're using those providers as your infrastructure as a service, or if you're selecting a SaaS solution, to ask about what are their RTOs, what are their solutions, so that if ever the cloud was to go down, because in essence, those are all data centers. So if those servers were to go down, well, what is the solution? What has the organization put in place? And I couldn't go without talking or alluding to CrowdStrike. So think the hidden dependencies. If you're looking at a SaaS solution or something that's in the cloud, well, chances are that if you're using something that's broadly spread, that you may also be subject to an interruption due to that. So understanding dependencies to fourth parties, systems that you haven't even thought about because they were just over your infrastructure. So, it can go into lots of details regarding technology if we want to make sure that everything will run smoothly if there's an interruption. Another area regarding hidden dependencies, it's also understanding, well, maybe I'm using a cloud provider to host my solution, solution, and you may be using the same provider as I am. So even though, we're not in the same, organization, we might actually end up, experiencing the same risk. So those are also information that is important. I know here with OSFI, which is the regulator in Canada for a financial institution, they do ask now to know for the third parties, what are their fourth parties to ensure that there isn't any concentration of risk that may be there down the line. The actual, so talking about the different, IT solutions, there's lots of solutions that are here. And I just, that's a slide that we've actually been using for many years. Just wanted to, emphasize and maybe educate the people that are not knowledgeable in IT, understanding the fastest that they're asking for the system to be back, as well as the shortest time frame that they're asking for the data, like the older the data, well, the most expensive it's going to be. If they can tolerate a longer time frame, well, that will definitely drive down the costs of having a solution A or B within the options. So supply chain, I think this is a key area. If you haven't looked at it, the Horizon scan from the BCI does highlight the supply chain risk as well as the technology risks as being, key risks that we need to prepare for. But with organizations that are more and more integrated, well, we need to understand better what's our level of dependencies, what are the service level agreement, and not only the service level agreement, what those recovery time objectives are, recovery point objectives that I just mentioned. Because it's one thing to have an SLA of 99.9% uptime with even some penalties that may be tied to a not meeting that requirement. But if they decide that the organization that's providing the service, that they're willing to take the hit and pay the penalty that be tied to your then your non-service delivery. Well, that's it. And you may need to be also, check your contracts, check what this force majeure clause is, understanding better, what's what the actual contract, offers. Also really understanding the dependency, because getting some clauses within the contracts can be difficult to obtain. And therefore, if it's just like a commodity supplier that you're not really dependent on, and that there are lots of other alternatives out there, well, you won't invest as much time in trying to get the clauses within your contract than if it's a single source supplier and that your level of integration is really deep. Again, I was having a conversation with a client yesterday where we performed a joint tabletop exercise with their outsourcing organization and the client. And yesterday we were doing a formal debrief after this exercise and recognizing the quality of the conversation, the relationship that exists within between those two parties, where they are very transparent. So we really know where their capabilities are, and there's no false expectation. But if that organization was to fail, well, the client would actually be in a, really bad posture because they're really integrated and very dependent upon them. But things that you dependent again on the nature of so it's really important for them to invest in that relationship. And for them, they've actually worked with the business partner to ensure that the business partner remains robust and that there are some alternatives that can be worked out together. But there can still be some opportunities with other business partners where you could increase the scope of the work. Be careful though with those other business partners. Do they have the capability to, you know, at short notice to be able to increase this level of service that they provide to you? Do you have that capability with that? You might want to have a contract that's signed with them so that you can say what are the level. You might have a retainer if that was to secure the volume that you may send over to them. Elements such as the insourcing as well. So maybe you want to bring back the service internally. Maybe you could do that temporarily. Depends on the nature, again, of the services that you have offered within your organization. So really things, that I want to, emphasize that are really important to consider when you're selecting your solutions. There's definitely a work of balancing the cost and the benefit. I couldn't go to management and ask for like millions of dollars for something that is unlikely to happen and, with not that many consequences. So really understanding the probability. I know that when we're working in business continuity, we don't know how, what's going to happen. But really, if it's something that's really, the probability are so small and the impact isn't that great, well, it will be hard. And really, you need to think from a management standpoint that you're competing dollars with initiatives that may bring money into the business. So if you can give that twist of what the advantage is, demonstrating that what you're putting in place will actually help in maintaining the promise that you're making to clients, well, that's something that, will help in having the right vocabulary. What goes into the top management discussion board? It's, what's my risk appetite? And if I'm giving you money to this project, well, I'm not giving money to another project. So really, if you can put together your solutions, and we'll talk about that in a moment, of making sure you have the alignment between the different solutions, that you've done your homework. That's going to help in making sure that you have the appropriate budgets approved. Also, reliability and urgency. So let's say if you have just a few minutes to do a task, well, you want to make sure that it's going to be reliable. I was giving the example to a colleague of a parachute. Well, I've actually done some tandem parachute in the past. Well, typically you have two parachutes, and you're really, you hope that the first parachute is actually going to work really well. But if that second parachute even fails, then you're really in big trouble. but you don't have time for error. You need it to be really well done. You want the person that you're, that you're doing that you're doing the fall with, knows how to do the work. There's no space or very minimal space for error. So the more urgency there is, if it's a life threatening situation. A colleague of mine was sharing experience from dealing with the hospitals. Well, if we're talking about people that are respiratory devices, well, you need to make sure that it's going to be reliable what you're putting in place. If you have, weeks to deal and, that you can improvise and call someone and is that it's not going to be, there going to be some damage, but not significant, then maybe you're able to wait and not invest as much on reliability. The actual service levels over time is really to, think, well, maybe in the first day when I was talking about the taking the phone and just at least taking the notes on paper and saying, well, I'm going to delay the work to a later time. Well, that could be a strategy as well, where, we're doing the minimum. And then as time goes by, well, we're bringing it back to 100%. So that could be something that you can, consider as you're developing your various strategies and solution. Obviously, in terms of geographical distribution, if you have a business model where your activities are being performed in various locations, well, that may help you in reducing the need for investment, but think about the distance. So I remember people telling me, well, I'll go to the next office, but the other office is just next door, or it could be on the same power grid. So depending again on the nature of your operations, how quickly they need to be recovered. If you're if you're in California or, in BC and like on the West Coast and and obviously you're subject to the fault of San Andres for risk of earthquake. Well, maybe you want to think about having operations on the other side of the Rockies. So that's something to also consider. What are the risks that you're subject to? But also geographical distribution could make it that it may be difficult to travel or to send elements over. So again, that could be a time factor as well. If you're looking to bring some inventory from another country. So those are things to think about. Also, there's the notion of partial failure and multiple failures. I talked about that when we were talking about the multiple the different consequences that could be happening simultaneously. Well, I could have a power failure caused by a extreme weather event, but that situation could make that people cannot come to the office or come to the work location. I could also have a cyber attack at the same time. I mean, so think that things could go wrong. If you think of Murphy's Law, things can actually happen simultaneously. So don't keep a false comfort from just thinking that the situation, it's just going to be one scenario happening. And that's something that you can do when you're doing your exercises as well, to train people in the fact that it could happen differently than what has been documented. And partial failure, well, maybe you don't want to shoot, your fly with a bazooka. So you want to be, determining when do you want to be invoking the big solution. Also think of the stakeholders' needs. Well, going back to hospitals, well, you need to think, can the patient travel to that other location? Also, the caregivers need to travel to that location. We also think, well, if it's a restaurant, well, I need people to be able to come to the restaurant. If you think again of COVID, where people have started doing takeout instead. So needs in that sense, but also your employee needs that also need to be cared for. So maybe you need to have some transportation and logistics taken care of. In terms of partner availability, that could also be having, maybe there isn't any partner that provides what I'm looking for. I might even decide that I may develop my own capability because of that. I also think, from a logistics standpoint, I was talking about, traveling, maybe security as well. So I don't want to be exposing myself to physical security. So those are things to think about, especially if you're more into distribution and manufacturing world. And again, there could be some restrictions at time of incident. Maybe the government's going to say, well, I'm requisitioning all equipment, and you can't use your contract that you had for quick ship of your generator. Maybe you won't be able to go to the specific location. You might not be able to travel. So those are all things to come into play. Again, I think COVID did highlight lots of issues that people had not necessarily thought about as they were building their different strategies. I mean, I hope that we won't live another situation such as COVID in our lifespan. And there are some organizations that now say that they don't need to have a business continuity plan because they've survived COVID. But, there's tolerance to interruption is always, lowering. People are expecting you to be there. And there will always be some situations where there will be an angle that you haven't covered. So exercises can definitely be a good way to instill that thought that there are needs for other preparation. This is an example when I was talking about the partial failure, you might want to develop a decision tree so that the top management understands that you're not going to be triggering the big shebang solution. Let's say if you're moving to another location, maybe if your recovery time objective was set to 3 days, well, within that 3 days period, this is how we intend to operate. If the site is still operable, if the power is still there, if the servers are still running. So those are all considerations that you could put in place. Just even if you're not necessarily using it at time of incident, please to educate and make sure that you've gone through the thought process and understanding if this situation was to occur, well, this is how things should be organized. In terms of the, when I was saying, we need to go balancing the cost. So what typically goes into the evaluation and implementation of solution are all these steps here that you're seeing here on the screen. Typically, as an external consultant, we might not be as much involved in that step because really this is where lots of projects will be kicked off. The actual implementation of the solutions is now detailed in professional practice number 5 within the good practice guidelines. But it's really, putting in place a working committee, looking at all the requirements you got from the BIA. It may be that you have depending on the nature of your activities, maybe you can group needs together. Maybe the lines of business are so different that you cannot group them together. But it's looking at the process owners, the activity owners, and working with the resource owners and looking at where the issues, risk related to the solutions could be time, location, employees, communication, and really putting all those different potential solutions on the table and looking at how each of them may have some costs. Maybe there's the capital expenditure that also needs to take into consideration and ongoing costs as well. Looking at internal versus comparison, getting quotes, RFPs, or RFQs to understand better what that could be. Looking at a cost benefit analysis, getting approval, making sure it's being implemented, and then reviewed and update over time. That's an example of an analysis that could be performed where for each of the business activity, looking at the scenario consequences, what the strategy could be, and then looking at what goes into the actual development of that work-off system. So in terms of staffing, what do we need? If we're going manual, obviously, we'll need to have more people. We'll still need to have some support from IT because in that specific case, there's outputs that could still exist from another system that we could leverage, and then identifying what would be the capital cost and the operational cost, and looking at what are the advantages and disadvantages. Here, the capital cost is quite minimal because it's only time of people, but it could be having a new server in. It could be buying additional racking if it was distribution or maybe office space. So depending on the nature of your business and the solutions, you may have both capital costs and operating costs. And the operating costs could be ones that you have at time of incident, so that you could have some one-off when the incident occurs, or some that actually you do need to maintain capability over time as well. I want to summarize the fact that it's important to have cohesive solutions that make sense for the overall objectives of the organization. You don't want to have an area of the business that overinvests and some other areas that may be more critical that don't invest sufficiently. So having visibility over what the strategies are being done for the entire organization and that they make sense with one another is really important. Making sure that it's also documented, that it doesn't, stay in someone's head. Be clear on roles and responsibilities, especially if it's spanning over multiple areas of the business. Make sure that you remain compliant with the various legal and regulatory requirements, industry standard if you're aligned with or compliant with ISO 22301 or 27001. All the security requirements continue to exist when an actual incident occurs, when there's a disaster that occurs. And really, I can say it more, the importance of training and exercising, that people know about it. And it's really by going through it and going to the level of even, performing in a safe environment that we'll see if there's any flaws, if there's any opportunities for improvement. But people do need to be aware of that. And something to monitor, I've seen some plans where people are saying, well, this is going to be my strategy. I like the fact of asking the different units, well, what's your resilience level? So it's one thing to have a good idea, but maybe that idea is not fully exercised or documented. So maybe we've actually listed it in the plans, but we actually have the, like we've named it, but it's maybe a yellow. Or maybe we have something, but we know it's really not good, so we put it as a red. So I really like to have that conversation with the business so that they understand it's not because they've put the idea down that it's actually that is something that they can do. So having them give a rating of the resilience level. I've seen some organizations even go to the blue level when it's all exercised, but most of the time it's really looking at the actual different consequences and looking what's our resilience level for each of them, understanding how much time it would take in order to activate and if there's any dependencies that are there. So as I was saying, you could have some situations where you have more than one location being impacted simultaneously, more than one consequences as well. So being able to have all this information together so that you can have full visibility on your capabilities. And really, the almost the last element, it's keeping abreast of the changes within the organization as well as within technology and the opportunities that are there. So it's important not to, once you've done your solutions design, that you sit and, you can relax for a bit, but not too much because things change. There's means that you can do that, obviously being informed and participating in conferences such as this one. Also looking at different documentation, the reports that are being issued by the Business Continuity Institute as an example, and also tying your processes to project management. So when there is a change within the business, that they think about business continuity as well. So that will help in making sure that you maintain your level of resilience. So this leads me to the end of the actual presentation. I'm now ready for questions. And here we had it takes two to tango because, as a BC professional, well, you cannot do this on your own. Like all the other pieces of the business continuity as management system. But more importantly here, you do need to partner with resource owners to have the expertise to understand, how can we continue operations.
Hélène, so well, thank you. It was really insightful. So please, if you have any questions, you can write it in the chat or in the Q&A. And we have already questions, so I'm gonna tell them to you. First question by Daniel: is it enough that the ISO 22318 to assess the risk of disruption of key business partners or suppliers, or do you recommend any other framework?
It's actually a really great framework. The 22318 is actually one that I do recommend to people if they're engaging in looking more deeply in the supply chain. Obviously, if you're subject to regulations such as OFSFI or others, the Bank of England, they also have specific requirements regarding third parties. So if you're looking more from a methodology standpoint, yes, go and look at the 22318. What's good, it talks about dependency, solutions, and strategies, as well as response at time of incident, which is also key to ensure that your business partners do inform you when an actual situation occurs.
Perfect. So Daniel, if you have anything else you want to add, please feel free. You can unmute yourself or write in the chat. We have also another question. So this is useful. It was regarding when you talk about CrowdStrike. So Yusuf said that this is useful to know for organizations who have Azure, Google, AWS, and they need to have dedicated DR plans update and how to align with critical processes. So it was great regarding what you were saying. Christopher wrote also, so when AWS US East Coast had an outage, they recovered based on their prioritization of needs, critical infrastructure, industries, and rather than the client's prioritization of needs. So the power imbalance between virtual hosts and many of their corporate clients is too significant to be influential. So I don't know if you
Well,
want to add something. Also, Christopher wrote about Netflix on their operational resilience. He gave the link to everyone. So really useful insights also for that. Thank you, Christopher.
excellent. Well, obviously, AWS, they have their own prioritization. So yes, if you're bigger in the food chain, you'll have, and that's the same for any business. If you're a key partner of your business partner, well, they'll probably, pay more attention and prioritize you versus if you're just a local, mom and pop shop. So that's also something to take into consideration. And who are we, our organization, in the supply chain of all the others. Like I know one of the areas also critical infrastructure. Well, if you want to reach out to critical infrastructure and understand, well, will they be recovering me faster than someone else? Well, depending on the nature of your business. So I know like here in the province of Quebec, the hydro company, the power company actually has prioritized like this, public safety, then like hospitals. And so those are, they've already set those prioritization. And as a like the community, unfortunately is, further down in the list of prioritization. But if you're close to a hospital, well, chances are you'll lose less power. So those are, things to consider, obviously, in your planning.
And another and the last question we have in the chat right now from Mario. Has there even been considerations placed towards having a client system or data backed up locally on a standalone alongside cloud? I mentioned standalone to mitigate data being compromised if on a network. Any thoughts?
Well, there's actually part of the cyber strategies. I'm not an expert on cyber, but to have those backups that are immutable, so that if ever there was if ever there was a malware, that they would not change. So yes, there is our organization at putting in place strategies so that they have a third backup that might not be as fresh as the normal ones that you would use for DR purposes, but that there can still be used to rebuild data.
So thank you, Marie-Hélène. Is there any other questions? You can unmute yourself or write in the chat. Right. So anything you want to say, Marie-Hélène? Ah, yeah, so Mike told us appreciate the reminder to utilize the BCI Good Practice Guide as a strong resource when continue program development. Yes, thank you, Mike. Of course, really important.
And to that point, really, there was lots of great work done on professional practice number 4, and there's lots of revamp done. So really, don't hesitate to go back to it. It'll give you ideas. When we were building that spreadsheet of looking at the various criteria, well, we looked if there was any additional insight that we could get from the good practice guidelines. So yes, don't hesitate. Everyone can go back to the book. It's not a demonstration of not knowing. It's a demonstration of being professional and looking at what others have looked at from a good practice standpoint.
All right, thank you, Marie-Hélène. So thank you for participating in this Insight webinar. So we hope the topics covered and the discussions resonate with your daily professional task. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can follow Marie-Hélène on LinkedIn, write email also. We're always there to help you. So once again, thank you for your time and your participation, and we wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the BCI.